have documented a lot of my publishing journey through my vlogs, but they're also mixed in with book content, and I felt like, based off of some of the questions I've gotten and conversations I've had, there might be a need to just have a dedicated condensed video, because if you came into my channel late, thank you, welcome, but also I don't want to just try and recommend you 30 seconds out of a clip of a vlog from a year ago. So hello if you're new here, my name is Jade. I am a cozy political fantasy author. This is my debut novel, The Solstice Court. I love her, and I'm going to talk about how I got to this point, the highs and lows, more minor details that you might want or need if you are looking at self-publishing. I also have the paperback version right here and the ebook version as well. So I have ebook, paperback, and hardcover, and I am widely distributed, so you can get my books just about anywhere a book is sold, as well as ordering it and requesting it at libraries. So go ahead, buckle up, get a nice warm beverage. I'm going with spiced chai today, but my intention is to make this as concise as possible. Hopefully the end result of this video is something not too bloated, but I do want to put as much information in here as possible so it's easily accessible. However, I will also have timestamps down below, so if there's a certain area you feel you don't need, go ahead and skip around as you please. I'm just not concise, but I'm gonna try. It's why I have an editor, but an editor is too far in the future. So let's go ahead and start us off by going back to 2020. The dark times, the plague. I was trapped at home, my plans for Japan had been cancelled, and I was in a not great place. Everything was just shut down immediately. There were some really abrasive and jarring changes, and I pretty much just had to hunker down at home and wait to see what was going to happen to my life. In that mindset, I wrote 3 books. I wrote the entirety of my trilogy in 2020. I'm not going to call them the first draft, I will call them the 0 draft, because it really was just all of my thoughts. There wasn't plotting, I just kind of blah, 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 and it all came out. Those are the technical terms. The end of my 0 draft was 75k, and I didn't even know it was the end of my first book because I wrote them all as one continuous story, and then I reached the end and kind of broke it up from there. I still had not vlogged any point of this journey. I was fairly on hiatus, but also just doing booktube content. I was kind of embarrassed that I had written 3 books, which is such a weird thing to think, but I was literally embarrassed. So I didn't tell anyone. Well, I did tell one person. I told Yumi Yamamoto. She is now my editor, but I did not know she was an editor when I first was talking to her. She was my friend I'd made through booktube, and I'd seen her post on the long forgotten Twitter that she had been writing a book. I thought that was really cool because I had secretly closeted written a book, and so I asked to read hers because I just wanted to see what another person was doing. I didn't even really know about indie publishing at this point. I literally just thought it was cool I found someone else who had written a book and hadn't published it yet, because I still don't fully understand the traditional publishing process. I was psyched. Once we got talking, I did admit to her that I had written a book, and we decided to do a critique partner exchange. This moment was pivotal for me. Getting someone else to look at my work was immense. I can't even picture what my future would have looked like without this moment. Having someone give me feedback on my work that wasn't my partner, that wasn't my mom, that wasn't my little brother, who did DNF it, by the way, the 0 draft. And it was embarrassing because I did find out that she was an editor and her book was in top tier form. And my book, I would almost call it illegible. I gave her my illegible book and she gave me amazing feedback. It was not an official edit, it was a critique partner exchange, but to call us critique partners, oh Yumi, I will never thank you enough. Eventually Yumi transitioned and we became a more professional set. She does the editing for my book and I am so happy I found her, but at first she had done it for a trade and that should have never happened, and I'm so happy that it did. So my first tip to you would be to get eyes on your work after you have written your draft. Let it flow. Let it be the 0 draft. I'm so glad that I wrote that first initial draft because it allowed me to just get the story out, and once I reached my conclusion, it felt amazing. I still know that my ending is not going to change. That's a through line that has stayed with me since the beginning of this book's conception, and it did give me the confidence to understand what I wanted, and that was for other people to see this book. I started to realize what I wanted from the book, I started to conceptualize the theme, and it just went from there, and a lot of that was Yumi me, pushing me, and asking me hard questions. From there, the summer of 2021, I started vlogging talking about my writing. It was the first time that I talked about it, and I was super shy and nervous, but I kind of knew what I wanted to do at that point, and that was in some way publish my book. I didn't know how, and the only genre understanding I had of it at that point, yes, I'm a booktuber and I didn't know what genre my book was that it was fantasy. I'll go ahead and link all of these videos that I talk about down below, but this was my first video talking about my book, and I really was just trying to figure out what I wanted to be, but I did know that I needed to start talking about it if I was going to eventually try and do something with it. I also just wanted to get more community as far as writing community, because at the time it was just me, my writing, and Yumi. So I guess you could say in 2021 is when I started building my writer platform, because my reader platform and my writer platform is still fairly two different groups. To this day, my writing content usually doesn't do as well as my reading content because I've built a community of readers. Me self-promoting a book doesn't have the same oomph to it as me talking about a book I loved and enjoyed without the bias of having written it myself, which makes sense to me. I don't know, it doesn't hurt me. Then we're hopping into 2022. The reason why there is a huge break in this is because I moved to Japan. The pandemic didn't end, but my stasis state did. My career moved forward, I moved to a foreign country, got into my apartment, and I was just overwhelmed. I took a big booktube break, I took a writing break. I was on standby because Yumi had the entirety of my book. So with that like empty writing space, I started working on my prequel. This is a book that's nowhere near completion. Because it's a prequel, it kind of has an ending, right? But I started working on my prequel and I started vlogging that because I understood that I wanted to get back into vlogging again, but I wanted to incorporate my writing in more. And I didn't know what I was doing with my second book because so many changes were happening in my first. I really didn't want to touch book 2. This was really helpful for me because it helped me gain a lot of understanding in background characters and characters that really do play an important role in the story, setting up the history and the world. And I feel like that did shine through in the final draft of the Solstice Court. You can tell that this world is lived in because I have lived in it in a different era. January to March in 2022 was pretty much just the editing of book 1, writing the prequel, getting back into vlogging, and then Yumi did return my edited manuscript and I pivoted right back to book 1 and doing those revisions. This was the first time I was really doing revisions beyond the critique partner feedback. So this was the first time where I was getting actual editing feedback. This was also around the time that I really solidified what I was going to be doing with my book and that I was going to be self-publishing. My reason for self-publishing comes down to control, but it also came down to my priorities as far as what I wanted to do with my writing in the future. My priority and goal list really has set me up for understanding what decisions I'm going to make throughout my entire writing career, because I can always go back to, does this serve the goal? Does this serve my purposes? Is this what I want, or is this what everyone else is doing? I wanted to be able to have control over sales. I wanted to be able to have control over what parts I kept in my book. If I wanted to make it a trilogy, right now trilogies aren't selling incredibly well unless you put out books beforehand. I didn't have a book to throw out to make my debut so that I could eventually write what I really wanted. I wanted to write the book that I had already put my heart and soul into, and I was okay with that being my debut. That's what made the most sense to me. The cover was also a huge thing. I had no idea what I was doing for a cover. I just knew I needed Kezura to be true to what she looked like. It's queer normative. Maintaining that control ended up being really important to me, and finding my readers ended up being my highest priority. It wasn't book sales or money. So once I knew that my main goal is to find my readers, everything else kind of fell into place. Everything just came down to my readers, finding the people that I was writing for. That was a priority list I made in 2023, and I really did see a change in my momentum. So it was full force from there. I ended up watching a lot of marketing videos. I watched a lot of author content. I really started trying to understand the publishing side, the marketing side of things, what I was capable of and willing to do. I watched Brandon Sanderson's videos. He has his entire class up on his channel. You can just watch an entire class where he goes through every single one of the stages of writing, including a marketing video. And then in spring, I started writing my blurb. I do get compliments on my blurb now. My blurb in the beginning was not hot. It was not good. This is the summary in Dust Jacket's side panel or the back of the book, not author's blurbing. I am really happy with how it turned out, but it was a process and it was really challenging, but it also helped me to write my blurb before my book was done, because it really helped me solidify what are my themes, what is the catalyst moment, what are these things that I really want to be very fine-tuned in the story. And if I couldn't succinctly say it, that it was probably not succinctly put into the book in any sort of place. And when I was doing revisions, that was just super helpful to go back to and be like, this is what I'm selling to people. It needs to be inside the book. Then moving into July, August, we'll call it summer of 2023, I started the process of trying to find a cover artist. I had a concept in my mind for what I wanted, and I did have an original artist that I'd been following for a long time. She's an absolute favorite of mine, and she very cordially denied me because she was busy and her timelines didn't work out. And that kind of put me at ground zero for finding an artist. I didn't really think about like what the process would be like. I hadn't really watched any videos on it, and so I just started following artists on Instagram. If I loved their art, I'd follow them, whether they did covers or not. I just tried to find more artists, and then I would go to artists they were following and I would look through their art and I would follow them until I now have on my Instagram, I would say almost 40% of the people I follow on Instagram are artists that do art. So yeah, so I stalked a whole bunch of artists and I came across this picture. I don't have a fox in my book. Something about this picture, I was just like, you're capturing something here that I really want captured in my book. So I reached out to this artist, didn't say that she did cover designs. Her name is Little Liz Art, and Liz was super sweet, and we both admitted this was kind of like our first time doing something like this, and it really became cool collaboration between the two of us. She wrote up a contract, we got the numbers down, she staggered my payments because I admitted I didn't have the money yet because I didn't even know what budget to set. I budgeted after and better understood what I would need budgeting wise going forward. We collaborated, we talked, and she signed on to do all 3 of my books. That right there, worth every bit of hardship indie publishing has given me. Finding Liz and having her do my cover art was worth all of it. After that, I set a budget and I found out some really hard facts. I found out that publishing is expensive. It doesn't have to be, but I really had to learn which parts of publishing I was willing to compromise on because I still had my purposes in mind and I knew my cover fit those purposes, they fit those needs, and I just didn't want to let Liz go. Covers range very widely, and I also know that Liz's prices are going to range widely based off of a lot of different factors, whether it's just an ebook cover, whether it's the hardbook cover and paperback, if there's 2 different characters on the cover, there's just a lot that goes into it. So I did budgeting and I found out my main priorities for my book was my cover, my editor, a map maker, a cartographer, ISBNs, and then formatting. ISBNs are the little numbers that go on the back of your barcode, and formatting is how you make your book look pretty inside, and there's several different ways to either hire a formatter, to do it yourself, or to buy and operate a software. I ended up buying and learning how to use a software. I used Atticus. Atticus has lots of bugs and things about it that I really don't like. I did end up with a book in the end, but it was a really frustrating process. Vellum is the one I have been eyeing, but it's just too expensive. I can't make it happen right now because I am hiring my cover artist again. I ended up going with Atticus, which was a lot cheaper. Vellum seems to be the crown jewel. Draft to Digital also has a formatting software. Just want to have your book formatted. Draft to Digital does have a way you can format it, I think just as an ebook, I believe. I don't know if they do physical copies. That's another thing I found out after the fact. I had already bought Atticus and I knew I wanted physical copies, so Draft to Digital is not something I know very much about. And then there's InDesign, which is what a lot of professionals use, but it's not very user-friendly, and I have zero background in graphic design, which I'm actually gonna have to get to here in a bit because I have a background in graphic design now now, and it's a little frustrating. So with my priority list in mind, I made a budget and found out that I was poor. At the end of the summer, I also gave my book to alpha readers. This was the next step in the process where I was having people read my book that loved me, would help me bury a body, but weren't Yumi, didn't have an editing background, would be reading it as readers, and I really am happy with how that process went. They were friends, they were loved ones, they were safe, and I thought it was a really nice ease in. It did take them longer to finish the alpha read. It took about 2.5 to 3 months. Everyone has lives and jobs, and they were just my friends reading my book on the side and trying to give me actual feedback. So I made a Google Doc for beta readers and kind of making my draft on there so that I could implement all the edits and make sure that when I made copies of all of them for the beta readers that it was all the same and it was the most up-to-date version. This draft was done entirely on Google Docs, and I did back it up, but it was a little nerve-wracking at first. I would advise always just backing it up. Things poof and Google can't be trusted. I did that, and I put together also a Google Forms for an interest list for my beta readers. I wanted beta readers who wouldn't help me bury a body because I needed these to be unbiased readers. So I needed people who would just tell me what sucked without caring about my feelings. I went onto Facebook, which was a terrifying place, and found some readers there on some different forums. And then I went onto Threads, and then I threw something up on my channel and was like, if you love me, please don't beta read for me. A couple people who loved me beta read for me, but it was immensely helpful and useful, and all of my beta readers ended up being amazing. So I put an interest list up, and that was at the end of summer of 2023. In fall of 2023, I received alpha reader feedback. It was incredibly useful, and I started doing revisions on that to make sure that I had this as polished as I could for my strangers, my beta readers. My alpha readers are the ones that told me that my book was cozy and that it was a cozy fantasy, and that was around the time Legends and Lattes was really big, so I was feeling very nervous about that, but it was pretty much universally said that it was cozy, so I went with cozy. At that point, I knew I was a cozy fantasy book that has stuck through the entire thing. I also, at this point, bought the domain for a website, but I ended up not using it. The amount of cost that goes into a website, which could be small for some people, it wasn't for me. It wasn't a small amount, and I had put so much time and priority into all of my other budgeting areas, it wasn't actually doable for me. So I ended up canceling my website, and I went with Cards, which is, it looks like this, and it essentially just has all the places to buy my book. There's not an about the author page or anything like that. I kind of have a giant about the author page on my Instagram and my YouTube channel, but it worked for my purposes, which was to make sure that people had a place that they could go to access or find or read my book that was somewhere other than like Instagram or Facebook. I went really full force into my booktube and writing content in fall of 2023. I really wanted to make sure I was building momentum, that I was trying to be consistent. I was seeing it as a way of doing marketing before the book was actually out, and I still wanted to try and cultivate that reader base before the book was there so that I had something to land on when the book actually first came out. So many people have been so amazing and so supportive. I'm really glad I did this. I'm glad that about a year out from publishing that I really started to market my book. Marketing a book without a book is a little difficult, but having a small platform to talk about your book, to let people know it exists, is very helpful. I did NaNoWriMo. I got very involved in the writing community. I uploaded consistently. I did live shows, and I also had beta readers. So there were people in the world reacting to my book before it was out. And so that really was a good timing, I felt like. Everyone was talking about the writing in their books, and I was talking about my writing in my books, and so were other people. I had a lot of fun. Beta reading is probably one of my favorite parts of the process because I got to see all the feedbacks, the reactions. I got just such amazing, amazing critiques. Moments that I would have never really pinpointed on my own were found by people who were just looking at my book raw and giving their honest opinion. I also had a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, and I can never thank my beta readers enough. And I loved the beginning of what felt like community to me, and I would never change that. So if you're thinking of possibly skipping the beta reader process, I would say that's the one thing not to skip. After the beta reading process, I had started with fantasy, and then it turned into cozy fantasy, and then Rachel specifically tell me cozy political fantasy. And I tossed it out there to other beta readers to be like, hey, is this something that is resonating with you? And they were like, oh my god, yes, it is incredibly political. I realized, of course it is. Besides the fact that reading is political and books are political, my book is literally political. Finally, it was decided cozy political fantasy book. I don't know if I would have ever reached that answer by myself. This is the point where my artist was not only found but booked. Before it was a budget and like reaching out, then she began working on it. This took about, I want to say, it felt really long to me because I was so excited, but I would say it was about a month and a half. Yeah, about a month and a half wait and a couple different revisions in between. I'm going through this video right now and I'm like, oh my god, there's so many things that I'm thinking about in the moment. Artist stuff. You do not have immediate exclusive rights to your cover art. Make sure you are paying commercial privileges with your art. Me and Liz have a contract, but she still holds some rights to the art, and to get the full commercial rights and everything, it's more expensive. I don't need it right now. We are going to be renegotiating for merchandise down the line. She's also going to be making me some merchandise. Just so you know, you do have to pay your artist always, but for commercial purposes, don't just immediately have rights to your art after you pay for it. Make sure that that's in the contract. I hadn't done a cover reveal or anything like that, but I was watching my cover be made at the same time as people were reacting to my book. It was wild. Fall of 2023 was wild. And then I did a title reveal. Then I had reached out to a map maker and they had fallen through and it was too late for me to find another cartographer. So they pretty much just flat out ghosted. It was a very disruptive point. It was hard, it was a bummer, and I really just didn't have enough time to find another one. But then my friend Cheyenne stepped forward and made this beautiful map as a Christmas present, and it was just, I love it. She literally brought my kingdom to life. The Thrice Kingdom existed because she made it so. And like, I just think that's so magical and so wonderful because it just made it all the more special, and she did it perfectly, beautifully. This is what's in my book and zero regrets on that. The end of fall 2024, my cover was finished. I looked at my cover, I cried over my cover, I was in love with my cover. I planned out my cover reveal, but didn't want to reveal my cover yet because Liz is a fantastic artist, but she did not do the text for my cover. I needed a typographer. So in winter of 2024, I went on to Fiverr and I was like, hey, I have a finished cover. I literally just need words put onto here. I figured I wanted my name up top and I wanted the title at the bottom. I wanted a nice but simple font, and I knew I wanted to be silver or white, and that was it. that was all I knew. And I went on and I found one for $50. They would do typography and put it on there. And then they ran my book, my cover, Liz's art through AI and whitewashed Kez and stuck terrible lettering on there. And I didn't know it was AI at first. I didn't know what was wrong. I just knew it looked wrong. Something's wrong. And I couldn't figure out what it was. So I was like, I think it's not quite right. Can you do it again? And the specific things did not come about. Like, we never got to a conclusion, and I was so frustrated, and I did end up having to spend the $50, cut ties. I didn't use it. It was very frustrating. I couldn't get him to do the thing I was asking, and that's because whatever prompts he was putting in, he wasn't doing it himself, and he was also dishonest about the fact that he was using AI. And then finally I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what to do, so I went back to Liz. Liz was able to identify those AI, and she offered up her willingness to try and figure out how to do the typography, but I had decided at that point this was my book. This was something that was really important to me, and I didn't have any money left. I went and I got the 3-month free trial of Photoshop, and I watched a million tutorials, and I learned how to do typography. I bought a font, then I learned how to do it. So the typography on the Solstice Court, I did. There are some little details that I always appreciate when I look at this book because I did them. This bird up in the corner here, that bird was where the J was. I had to move that little bird because he was in my way. The S wrapping around the flag, I did that. And I thought it was going to look horrible, but I made it look normal. The sword and some of the arrows jutting through, I did that over, I have to say, over like 8 hours. I know that that's small potatoes to a graphic designer, designer. I had never touched Photoshop before in my life. I didn't even know how to filter my face in high school. Like, I saw people throwing things up on MySpace and I was like, how did you make your complexion look like that? I had no idea what I was doing and I did it. And I now know exactly how to do it for my next book. And I'm really happy and really proud of myself for that. And the fact that I was layering my work over top of Liz's terrified me. I was mortified every single time I got something wrong. It felt like I was breaking into a sacred tomb. But I did do it and I feel really happy with it. And I think that the next book will even look crisper and cleaner because I know what I'm doing this time. It was really cool and something that came out of a poor situation. Probably the poorest part of the process for me, apart from uploading my book onto Ingram Spark, which was a holy terror. Sorry, I forgot to elaborate on Ingram Spark and KDP, and I'm just going to do that really quick because it is pretty important and I feel like I might get a lot of questions about it. Ingram Spark, you initially don't have an upload fee if your book is completely finished. So if your book is ready to go, everything is correct, the cover is ready, external, internal files, you have nothing else to do, then Ingram Spark is perfect to go ahead and upload, and you do get a free first upload. However, any changes you make to Ingram Spark after the fact, I feel like it was 30 or 60 days, you have to pay a fee. This is the current fee Ingram Spark has you pay. KDP is free to upload completely, and you can get a paperback and a hardcover case laminate. So a dust jacket is through Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark also allows you to do the case laminate with your cover on it, which a lot of people have really loved that I did this, and I'm really happy I did too. I did the case laminate without the typography just so you could really appreciate Kezra and all of her glory, but Ingram Spark is not incredibly easy to use. I'm going to link down below specific people's videos that I watched in order to go through Ingram Spark. I will also link down below the manual Ingram Spark gives you in order to do the uploads. That was immensely useful, but it was hard to find. I didn't know it existed at first. I ended up paying a whole bunch of money. I don't recommend doing a physical pre-order, and I didn't do a physical pre-order for my books because so many authors have had unfinished copies sent out first to the printers because they held on to the old data. It had already like kind of pre-printed them and then sent those out before the finished copies. Empty manuscripts sent that way. Ingram Spark is not good for like fast or like efficient publishing in that way. It's meant for your finished product. They are used to working with traditional publishers, and it is how you get your book into bookstores like Barnes & Noble, like libraries, indie bookstores. They all have access to Ingram Spark's catalog. A lot of people don't use Amazon because they are a competitor. That's why I chose Ingram Spark despite it being hellish, and it was hellish, but I will again link my resources down below that I used to go through it. I definitely struggled with it, so I feel like I'm not the one to give advice for it, but I definitely wanted to put it here. I'll put a couple other distributors there for special editions. I've heard really great things about this company. There's also on Ingram Spark an option to do no returns, returns with destruction, or returns with shipping. I did returns with destruction, so return my book. Bookstores are able to return my book, but it destroys the book, which is a terrifying thought, but you know, whatever. Instead of it shipping it to me, I live all the way in Japan, they would ship my book and it would cost me so much money per book that was returned. The only reason I don't have no returns set is because a lot of bookstores won't purchase or buy a book if it says no returns. But if you really push for people to request your books at bookstores and libraries, a lot of bookstores and libraries will take a chance because they already have the sale. So if you are really wary about having to have any sort of fee with that, no returns might be the option for you, and you can still make that work. If you want to get into bookstores, returns is, from what I understand, kind of an industry standard, as well as bookstores getting the 55% discount. That's what I got. I'm just now realizing I didn't mention all of this and it was in my notes and I just skimmed over it and was like, anyway, that was terrible. So hopefully that's a little helpful. Just gives you some insight into why I made the moves I made. So in spring of 2024, I had a publishing date. Because my beta readers were finished, I knew a realistic time of when I could get this feedback done, and I up until that point had no idea, and I didn't want to set a date with Amazon because Amazon does penalize if you put it up for pre-order or something like that and change the date. It can actually get rid of your pre-orders. I didn't want to tell people a release date and then look wishy-washy by changing it, so I waited until I was done with beta readers where I knew I was far enough in the process where I could set a deadline for myself and keep to it, and I found the perfect release date for my book. My book takes place place on the autumn equinox. That's when the story really opens up and the catalyst happens. So I set my book for release on the autumn equinox, and it just felt so right. I was also able to set pre-orders for this time, and I think I got about 30 pre-orders. I just want to say that realistic number because I know a lot of people are going to get a lot more and a lot of people are going to get a lot less. With all of the things I did leading up to it, it's still asking people to buy a book and take a chance on you having not read it yet. That was just cool. The fact that there was even one person, let alone 30 people, who were willing to pre-order my book, I was over the moon. From there, I went ahead and started the ARC reading process. Once my beta readers were finished and I had implemented that feedback, I knew that I still wanted to get more eyes on it, and I wanted people to start being able to give me reviews on it. My beta readers couldn't really give me reviews because they weren't reading the final finished copy of the book. I wouldn't even want a review on that copy of the book because their feedback hadn't been implemented, and it's what made my book so wonderful. ARCs, if you're unaware, is the advanced reader copies or advanced review copies. I put a spreadsheet together and I followed my goals and my priorities of what I wanted in readers. I wasn't prioritizing book sales. I wasn't prioritizing money. I was prioritizing my readers. So if they had 0 following, that was okay, as long as they were willing to read my book. Word of mouth, give it a review, put it out there in the world. I was happy to send them an ebook copy of my book. I was not looking at followings. What I was looking at was their taste and books they'd reviewed in the past, and if they had reviewed books. I wanted a higher chance of actually getting people to review the book because it's not necessary for them to review the book. You are giving them the book in the hopes of an honest review. It's not a transactional or contractual obligation for them to give you a review. So I just wanted it to be a higher chance. So I looked at people who reviewed a lot, who spoke about books a lot. Whether they had a following or not, I just wanted to make sure that they were telling people books they were reading, as well as looking at what they were reading. If they were reading primarily thrillers and horror books, maybe my book wasn't right for them. That's not my choice once my book is published, but looking for ARC readers, those advanced reader copies that I was giving out for free, I did prioritize people who I thought would love my book. Also, my ARC copies were specifically sent through BookFunnel. This allows people to have a download. You can set download limits. It protects it somewhat from piracy. There's also lots of other opportunities on BookFunnel if your book has already been published. BookFunnel also just opened up the ability to do audiobooks as an ARC process. So BookFunnel was a really great resource for me. I think that that's all. I might be back. I don't know. This was the only time where I kind of made a more curated list. I also put together a street team. We did giveaways over on Discord, and I really appreciated my street team. I still have my street team members that will reshare my posts, and I appreciate you guys so much. The street team on Discord was specific to the launch of the book. It's not something where it's really active right now because there's not a book being published. There's no launch. The giveaway aspect was really fun because we kind of got to gamify finding errors in the book or completing the book, requesting it at libraries, doing just small giveaways so that I had a chance to give away physical copies of the book since they already had the ebook form. It was incredibly useful and such a learning experience because I had never done something like a street team before. From there, I found that I definitely wanted to take the readers from my street team that really enjoyed the book, because some of them, it wasn't for them, and other people didn't end up getting to it. They had lives, and I was able to kind of take some of those core readers that really enjoyed my story. And in the spring to summer of 2024, I started my newsletter. The difference between my newsletter to my street team was my street team were just really kind people who were willing to take a shot reading my book and posting about it and putting their good name out into the world saying you should totally try this. And my newsletter subscribers, amazing and kind people who loved my book and were able to go over to my newsletter to get bonus material and more in-depth looks at my life, and I was able to drop my first newsletter on release day. Other things I did from spring to summer leading up to release day, I really went full force on TikTok. I wanted to give it a chance and I wanted to see what I was capable of. Turns out, not capable of TikTok, not regularly. The consistency needed for TikTok is not something I was willing to put my energy into. That's going to be different for different people. I know that I could reach readers that way. The toll it took on me to make that much short form content is just not for me. What I am able to do is Instagram, because I can do stories, I can do posts, I can talk about other books, I can talk about things that I'm really interested in and that are important to me, and I can do reels and kind of get my books out there that way. So I definitely leaned more towards Instagram and less towards TikTok. There was also all of the things that were going on with TikTok even before like the ban was started, and that might be different again for different people, but for me, it was too much energy. It was too much output and not enough input. I wasn't getting as much out of it. Sometimes I reached readers on there and I'm so happy that I did, but in the end, it didn't outweigh the cost for me. Mainly focused on Instagram for marketing and then a little bit on BookTube and YouTube just because my platform's already here. And I've been building community both in the writing and reading community for such a long time, and it's been so enriching to me that while I am doing output, I get a lot of input from being part of this community that fills my cup versus drains it. I also did a second wave of ARC readers. This one was more book influencer focused. They didn't need to have a large following, but I did go ahead and reach out to booktubers. I also reached out to booktubers who are bigger, scarier, and I enjoy them and I watch them in my own free time. Most of them just didn't respond. Which sounds really sad, but I would prefer it than them saying like, no. I don't know. Everyone's different with that. Like, I'm good to be ghosted, actually. That was not as helpful as I thought it would be. Reaching out to bigger booktubers, personally, not where it's at. And I found in being a smaller channel, you get a core community. I recognize the people in my comments, and if we're recommending each other books, I truly do feel like there's a strong connection. It was a learning experience and really interesting to be on the other side of it because I have been on BookTube for 8 years. 8 years. I'm also not monetized. Just want to throw that out there. Just in case someone else wants to absolutely rage about that. I don't mind anymore, but there was a point in my life where I really cared. I'm getting on a tangent. We have a schedule. We're moving on. Found out big booktubers were not the easiest to get a hold of, and so my second wave of ARCs was smaller but very successful. The people that did post about it and talk about it, thank you so much. So then I went ahead and decided to do my long forgotten readathon that I co-host with Soleil. We revived Draconathon literally the month before my book came out, when I was probably the most on fire. I can say this: don't make big, huge commitments and plans right before your book release, right before everything's gonna hit the fan, things are gonna go crazy. Try not to do the most involved thing you can possibly think of. I went ahead and we hosted Draconathon, and it was super in-depth. I had spreadsheets. We did a gem hunt. It was so much fun and so much effort. Anyway, we're gonna do it again next August, and it was a blast. We even started like a book club. I'll put the links to that down below. There's a reality in which I would have just spent that last month on the book and only the book, and I think that I would have been a lot less stressed. However, I also booked a trip with my partner to go see my mother-in-law, and we left for the trip the day my book launched. So I was in the air for 8 hours on an airplane when my book was being published and sent out into the world. But what I did, while also reading dragon books, I pre-filmed and pre-scheduled a lot of content. I pre-filmed and scheduled getting ready for publishing. I pre-filmed reels to go up. I had a street team who was willing to share everything for me. So I just got to be up in the air, and then I landed and I just crashed out, fell asleep, and I slept through my book launch. And when I woke up the next morning, it was so nice because the party had happened and I had missed it, and it was perfect because I didn't have any of the anxiety or the fear. I didn't have time to have anxiety or fear. It was over. People were really kind, a whole bunch of reshares and like supportive messages, and I just got to look back at the party that had happened and gone, wow, thanks guys, this was a great party. So yeah, the trip was really nice, and I think I would want to do that again in the future. I would like to put all of the heavy right before the launch, be so focused on that I don't have time to worry, and then put myself in a vacation setting so that I can just get away the moment that I'm dropping a book and just have that all kind of roll out. Since my book has launched, I've had so many other opportunities. That first initial launch was really helpful and like achievement unlocking, but after the fact, I've also had lots of opportunities to sell my book. I'm kind of doing it now. If you want to buy my book, all of the links are down below, and maybe, possibly, one of you will click on it. Book launch wasn't the end of my book sales. It was the beginning. I will go into a little bit of what I've sold and like the numbers, but I do want to talk a little bit about the winter, which is where we are now as of filming. I started connecting with people more on Threads and Facebook. Those same groups where I was finding beta readers also had a lot of authors who were also looking to get their books read, and I started to connect with them and be like, hey, where else are you looking? Where are you going? And I was able to find Stuff Your Fantasy sale. It's not just for Kindle, but it's an event where you give out your book for free. Lots of people have lots of opinions on this. I found it wonderful. I did my first sale a month after my book came out. I put it for free and it gave it so much visibility. I got like 2,000 downloads. From there, I got reviews. I got my cover out there. I got all of these different authors and all of these different readers talking about this event and posting about it. Did I get money from that sale? I would say yes. After the sale was over, people were still talking about it. It was still out there. It was more out there than it had ever been before. I was also able to make a lot of good author connections, which leads to just more success in general. So I have more community now. I have different events that I'm aware of. And this sale was pivotal for me because I realized something about my priorities made me no longer align with KU. My book was originally on Kindle Unlimited, which is the subscription platform for Kindle and Amazon. So people were able to, if they had the subscription, read my book for free, and I would get money based off of page count. It allowed people to read my book for free if they had the subscription. But after the sale was over, Amazon told me, oh, well, you can only have one more sale for 2 more days for the rest of this quarter. I've self-published for the reason of having control over it. And I really loved being able to give out my book for free. I loved being able to do sales, to control the pricing of it. There was just so many things where I was like, oh, don't tell me what to do. It is incredibly useful for other authors and readers. I am not hating on people who use Amazon or KU in any aspect. You do you, only do you. Don't do anyone else. I needed to do something different. And so I took my book off of KU because I saw an opportunity making it widely distributed that I could reach more of my readers, or to help open the door for other platforms so that more authors can feel comfortable, more readers can feel comfortable going to other platforms. Not everyone can do this. I have the privilege of having a full-time job and this being essentially a really fun hobby and side gig for me. I wanted to be able to use that privilege to go ahead and put my book up for free, to have sales in which I did not have to include Amazon in the sales, to encourage people, if they could step out, to step away from Amazon. And I did. I had my first sale this Valentine's Day. It was a Swoon at the Solstice Court sale. I made the graphics myself and came up with the sales pitch myself. That's why it's like that. And I said it was everywhere but Amazon. Everywhere else my ebook was sold, it was 99 cents. And on Amazon, it was full price. And you know what? I got sales and I got people to get my book on other platforms. I got to allow readers who are not using Amazon to get my book for a cheaper price instead of having to pay full price. So I felt like I was connecting with them, and I still got Amazon sales. So while my book was 99 cents, 10 people bought my book off of Amazon while my book was on sale everywhere else. And like, that's fine. I'm completely thankful. You guys had the option and you bought where you wanted to. And that's what I want. I want people to have options. I want freedom. I want freedom of movement, and what can I say? I'm an Aquarius. That's personally where I ended up. As far as where else I ended up, I am also on Kobo Plus because it's non-exclusive. So if you have a Kobo Plus subscription, you can read my book for free as long as, you're subscribing, but that's the idea. I really like what Kobo is doing. I like the moves it's making. I think it's hot. Bookshops.com is also going to be doing ebooks. I have my eyes on that. My physical copies are already on there, and I'm ready as soon as bookshops.com has ebooks open up. I'm there. I'm just trying to diversify as much as possible and spread out so that there's options. I just want everyone to have options. I don't regret KU in the beginning because it did give those people options, and I gave them 2 weeks notice to download my book. We were able to download my book while it was on KU, and so people had enough time to, if they wanted to read my book in the future, they could download it. So I still get page reads from KU from when it was on there, which is very interesting. Who knows how many years I'll still be getting KU page reads. Finally, I'll go over a few of my stats. My number of copies sold to this date, sold or downloaded, because I can't differentiate it from the sales. These are the amount of copies that are with readers via Amazon. These are my Goodreads reviews, or the amount of Goodreads reviews I have, as well as my Goodreads score. My Amazon reviews are here, and then I don't actually read reviews anymore. I haven't read reviews in a while. Read my first 1-star review, and they used the word drivel, and I put that in my book immediately for book 2. I thought drivel was such a good word, and I was like, why am I doing this? It was voyeurism in like the worst way. And then the good reviews are wonderful, and people can still always tell me my book is wonderful, all if they want to tell me that. If my book is terrible to them, don't tag me. I don't want to know. I've already read my book. I already have an opinion. But you're always welcome to tell me if you enjoy my book. Slide into my DMs and be like, I love this part. I think this was really interesting, or I feel seen. Anything you want to tell me about my book, I'm always happy to talk about it. I wrote it. I can talk about it all day. Where I am now, the first half of the book is with my editor. I rewrote Trash Zero Draft into something for my editor. Yumi has the first half of my book, and I am almost done with the second half. My cover artist, Little Is Art, is again booked, and she is currently working on the cover. I hope to have concepts for my newsletter, but I can't promise it. That's not in my control. If she's ready and the concepts are ready, then I'll put those in my newsletter. I have the link, of course, to my newsletter down below. Then I have an ongoing GoFundMe. I can use all the help I can get. To be perfectly clear, I'm just trying to fund this as best as I possibly can. I didn't do a Kickstarter, pretty much just because it's an all-in-one deal. If you don't get your goal complete for the Kickstarter, then they take all the money back. All of my current profits that I get from my book goes towards book 2 and publishing it. The only thing I did not towards book 2 was the first time that I got a notification I was getting a royalty and that it was going into my account. I bought a coffee because that was one of my original goal for myself. Is I was like, I just want to make enough money that I can buy myself a coffee. And the entire time I was drinking it, I realized my book had paid for it. My first royalty did not come in when my book came out. It came out in December. It takes this amount of time for Amazon and Ingram send you your money. Around Yuletide, Christmas time, when I was sending out my newsletter, I also got paid. I think that's it. If you have any more questions about the publishing process, about my writing process, anything having to do with any of this, let me know in the comments down below. If you have questions, I will answer them in my next night write vlog. The series that I've started where I write at night and I just kind of like chat for a little bit, they're about 15 to 20 minutes long, unlike whatever the hell this is. Apart from that, I don't have anything really else to say. I appreciate anyone who stuck around. If you've made it this far into the video, go ahead and leave a cloud emoji for Kez's hair turning into clouds on the cover of my book, because that is like one of the most lovely things I had ever seen. And whether you do or not, I hope you're enjoying the sun or more stars wherever you are. And until next time, bye!